Now, one of the things Power Rangers has to deal with when using, Super Sentai footage is that certain things are allowed on Super Sentai that Power Rangers doesn't allow at all, like blood. So there have been many things over the years that Power Rangers had to censor out of the Japanese footage in order to put it on the show. And a lot of them are very weird, confusing, and most of them are caused by Disney because they're much more stricter than what Saban/Neo Saban and Hasbro seasons did.
Villamax's revolver.
Now, everyone knows Villamax, and he's like one of my favorite. Even though he was a villain, he had a really interesting arc. He was very honorable, and you liked him because, Trakina was the one that was always being used by her father. So again, he kind of felt like, the hero of her story. But if you ever wondered, Villamax did exist in Gingaman. However, his Sentai footage was virtually never used. In Gingaman, they had factions and generals that led those factions, and that's what those emblems were on each of the monsters' chests. Villamax was one of the leaders, and the reason why Lost Galaxy could basically never use Villamax was because one of his main weapons was a 6-shooter. Basically, when it comes to kid shows, in 99.9% of the time, they don't like showing real weapons. They'll show blasters and show energy weapons, but they don't want to show regular guns. And even if they do show regular guns, in a lot of cases, these regular guns will end up being energy weapons. They don't shoot bullets because I don't know the logic. It's basically, because it replicates real life, even though, you get a laser gun, the kid still replicates, a gun, the same actions. I don't see the difference. The whole point is to, teach the child to not misuse guns. Yeah, you have your playtime, you have your goofy gun, but never touch a real gun. Respect the real gun when you see an adult using it. That's why we don't see real guns in Power Rangers.
Grow liquid made green.
Now, another aspect of Gingaman that was brought over to Lost Galaxy but modified. Since they had different factions in Gingaman, all of them had different growth processes, and the one that we used in Lost Galaxy was the Balban Elixir. But in Sentai, the Balban Elixir looked basically like wine, booze, alcohol, so they couldn't use that. And instead, Lost Galaxy basically had this green, scientific beaker that they drank out of.
Rader Shotgun.
Now, another example of a weapon being censored in Lost Galaxy is Rader Shotgun. If you watch the original Gingaman episode, he uses the shotgun throughout the entire episode. Now, in Lost Galaxy case, it's completely removed in all the US footage of Rader and cut out as much as possible as they can. Although there are certain shots where you still see a shotgun, mainly during the Zord fight when the Lost Galactibeats come to Terra Venture.
Sam's laser pellets.
Now, more famously is Sam's laser pellets. Deca Ranger was heavily film noir, detective, police, so they used a lot of, guns, bullets, revolvers, everything. Everything had that type of motif. So obviously when it came to SPD, they had to do a lot of censoring. And in one particular episode when Sam first arrived as the Omega Ranger and he was fighting Morgana and the other two monsters, and when Sam used his, hyper speed on his, morpher, he caught laser pellets. But in the original Japanese footage, it was really bullets that he caught. It never made any sense when you think about it. How does Sam catch lasers when they don't even bother cutting out when the bullets rain and fall down the ground? All they do is simply cover them up with glowing things, and you could still even see that they're still bullets. I understand it where you have to censor it, but then why keep the pellets falling down on the ground? Just cut that shot.
Krueger BLW Flames.
Now, this censorship, I do not understand. We've had many Rangers over the years that have a fire motif to them. They control fire. Lost Galaxy Red. He has his finisher that surrounds him by fire. But for whatever reason, again, Disney was very strange with their censorships. Whenever Krueger did his finishing move, he would charge up his sword, and then he would do his slash while he slides around the floor. He's surrounded by fire. But in SPD, the flames were slightly colored blue. Blue! Which made all the color of the scene very odd. I don't understand why they did it because, again, we've seen fire in many cartoons, many shows, which can't even be replicated in a general sense, unless you want to set your house on fire. I don't understand the point of changing it to a bluer tone.
Necrolized Costume.
Speaking of more odd censorships, is Necroli's Costume. Now, obviously, everyone knows Necroli was a character in Maji Ranger as well, but if you notice, whenever we're watching Mystic Force, 99% of the time, they shoot original US footage of her no matter what, except whenever she's very far away from the camera. Like, for example, Vipra and Lightspeed Rescue, where they obviously have to replace a Japanese actress in the Go-Go 5 footage with our American Vipra. Necroli's original Japanese costume was much more revealing. Basically, she does have the netting like we see in Mystic Force, but it was made far more denser where you don't really see her underboob and her abs. We've had in past Power Rangers seasons, they showed cleavage before. A prime example is Divatox. They showed her stomach and her cleavage throughout the season and the movie. To this day, I still don't understand why underboob is such an odd thing to censor when overboob is okay. It's like, what, did the Disney censors move over to Twitch?
Ninja Beams.
Another censorship that people might not even realize because it's fairly quick is the ninja beams in Ninja Storm. Shurikens, you know, these famous things that, you know, Naruto has used, and that's what the ninja beams are supposed to be. In the original Hurricane Gyro footage, when they use the ninja beam attack from the Hurricane Gyros, they actually shoot out shurikens, and actually they shoot and impale the minions and monsters in the season. It was covered up as laser beams, and they cut out the impalement shots. I can kind of understand the impaling, but at the same time, there is no blood. They're monsters, they blow up, they spark. That's the reason why they invented foam, you know, weapons and swords and stuff for kids, so they don't hurt, you know, people in general. I never understood why they had to censor them with ninja beams.
Dreadhead Shotgun.
Now here's another censorship involving a shotgun. Dreadhead from Samurai. Now, in this case, well, you thought, oh, Saban in the past has been very lenient in a lot of shots before, and you're right. Dragonzord Battle Mode was allowed to drill into monsters, and we see, you know, the hole right through its chest. But in Dreadhead's case, they did censor his shotgun. They didn't take it out because it would have been a lot of footage they would have to reshoot. What they did was they basically kind of covered it up. So basically, he still shoots a shotgun, it still has the sword at the end, but what they did was they covered up the barrel and it shot lasers out.
Vexus Is Impalement.
Now, this one is a blink or you miss it moment, and I completely forgot this was one of the very few rare cases where they actually shoot US Zord footage. The only time they really have to shoot US Zord footage is when they are actually desperate and have no choice but to do it. In what happened in the original episode of Vexus's Japanese counterpart, the Goragers had to stop, you know, Vexus's character from going after the Hurricanegers. There was a lot of story and plot that they didn't use in Ninja Storm for this. But long story short, the Goragers had grabbed Vexus and basically impaled and stabbed their sword right through him and then them to keep him pinned. That's how desperate the situation was getting, which is kind of confusing because, like I said, in past Power Ranger seasons and even present, the monsters blow up. They almost never show blood. We've seen them get impaled, but for some reason in this particular case, it was too much. It's even more confusing because, again, the Thunder Megazord is a robot. Like, in general, no one really cares about the monsters, which I always said that it's kind of hypocritical that the Rangers happily-go-lucky blow up monsters. But in this one case, they couldn't do it, so they reshot all the close-ups of him being impaled with, him just, simply attacking him with the sword from the back and front. But if you look really closely during the wide shots, when everything blows up, you could still see the impalement in Ninja Storm.
Locars head exploding.
The number one biggest censorship had to go to Locars head exploding. But there was no blood involved, and it's kind of cheesy when you actually watch the original G-Ranger episode, but it does cause a plot hole, basically. When the Rangers are fighting Locar and Goldar in his Zord, they summon the Ultra Zord, they shoot both of them, and Locar, see the electricity forming around him, but then they cut away, and we see, Goldar, eject, and he teleports, and his Zord blows up. But Locar disappears. What happened? We actually see Locar's head blow up, plaster pieces. Power Rangers has censored a lot of things from the Super Sentai footage in understandable ways, but in other ways, no, because it's just really dumb. There's many more censorships, and I think in some particular seasons, like Abare Killer in Abba Ranger, a lot of that stuff had to be censored around through it. But I still do want to mention two particular censors that I really personally hated. I guess you can count them as honorable mentions.
Dragonzord's rockets.
Now, when MMPR was re-aired, either in the revirgining or when they just re-aired the show in general sense, Disney was much more stricter than what Saban aired. And one common thing they censored out of the MMPR episodes was Dragonzord's rockets. The whole thing about censorship when it comes to guns and weapons, it's like, oh, we don't want kids to replicate it, even though you still can. So you can't replicate rockets. So whenever rockets are involved in any of the Disney seasons, they did censor them, like the Battlefleet Megazord. When they re-aired MMPR, all the shots of Dragonzord shooting his rockets, they cut out. So it caused a lot of weird edits. One particular edit that was really stupid was in the Green with Evil multi-parter where, they basically just cut to where the guys are just looking at the viewing globe. You can jarringly hear the music cut in and out.
9/11 Time Force.
But the biggest edit in history will have to go to the Time Force edits. Now, if you don't understand, when 9/11 happened, they went back and re-edited virtually everything that involved buildings. You know, whether an explosion was near it, whenever debris was falling, people were endangered. They heavily edited and censored the episodes, and it caused a whole bunch of mess. Either dialogue changes to make them sound less, brutal, even like removing sounds of people. So it was just a very quiet scene, or they stole like different cuts here and there to cover up any type of dialogue changes. So when you watch those censored episodes, it's very odd, and especially the Q-Rex fight. You'll see tons of Q-Rex running shots, but then it just abruptly goes away and nothing, and you could never see any of the city being attacked by it. It's the most famous edits because it's the only ones that survive till today, because of either they destroyed the original broadcast versions or they just lost them somewhere hidden in a vault. My guess, they actually did destroy the original masters of the broadcast versions, and the only real way they would ever be able to do it is if they actually went back and re-edited them, but no one's ever going to do that. Me personally, I always wanted to go back, get the footage from Time Ranger. I have the original broadcast for almost virtually every episode. There was probably 3 episodes or 4 episodes I don't have, but I would painstakingly love to re-edit the Time Force episodes with the original footage as much as I can from Time Ranger, but I couldn't get everything because there was a lot of stuff that they did cut out that was US footage they filmed. I would have to take it from the original VHS tapes that I have and restore them as best I can, but I could never release it. It's a lot of work, so that's why I never did it. But yeah, the Time Force edits are very hard blight on Power Rangers, mainly because the season was so beloved. Like, if this had happened with Ninja Steel, I don't think really people would any care. But because it came from Time Force, and because a lot of the reason why you love Rancic, because he was such a really good villain, a lot of that stuff was censored out, and it just made the show feel really dumb. But the pre-episodes were much more interesting, much more cooler, and much more dramatic that a lot of people today don't even know about, which sucks because, the majority of the people have only seen the censored versions, and very few people remember or even have the original broadcast version. Even when I was a kid, I remember various dumb censorships that went along, and I always disagreed with them. I understand what a gun is a bad thing to use. I'm not going to be, using a real gun, but if it's a plastic toy version, of course I'm going to be pointing it at my friends and do stupid things as a kid because it's fun and it's dumb. It's not going to harm anyone. Kids are much smarter than you think.